This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. New Society Publishers is your gateway to a regenerative future. They're not just about books, they're about transforming lives and communities through the power of knowledge and action. Their mission is simple: to inspire and empower individuals to create a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world. They envision a future where every person has the tools and resources they need to thrive in harmony with nature, where communities are resilient and interconnected, and where equity and justice are fundamental principles guiding our collective journey. If you subscribe right now to their newsletter at newsociety.com, you'll be the first to receive sneak peeks at new content and get discounts on upcoming title releases. You'll even get an exclusive discount code on your first purchase of books, ebooks, or audiobooks. So sign up today at newsociety.com. Hey there everybody, and welcome back. So continuing with my series highlighting badass local people around my community here in Spain, I was really pleased to be able to share this conversation that I had with a close new friend of mine and soil health advocate extraordinaire, Isadora Schmidt. Now, I was first passed Isa's contact by another good friend of mine, Noemi, who is also part of the Soil Food Web graduate network. Now, Isa created Terra Viva, her consulting and soil analytics company, operating from her home base of Manresa, which is a small city about an hour west of where I am. She has a very diverse background, which you'll hear about in a minute, but principally, she describes herself as a microbe farmer driven by a deep concern for food security and a love for the natural world. She dedicates her work to regenerate soil health through the power of microbes and ecosystems. With a focus on tailor-made compost and liquid amendments, she partners with farmers and growers to restore soil microbiota and promote sustainable agriculture. Isa is also passionate about fostering connections within the agricultural community and continuously learning about the latest advancements in soil science. Now, I've gotten to know her as an incredible connector who has partnered with many of the institutions and the leading practitioners in our region while helping to make connections between all of them in order to advance the broader movement of regeneration in our region. Now, this represents another special opportunity for me, since she came to my farm to take soil samples for me in this year's round of measurement and monitoring for the health and the ecological function of the farm. I already have a lot of data points from ecological monitoring, and so soil microscopy adds an incredible depth and dimension to the larger story of soil health that I'm working to build. In this episode, we start with a quick review of the activities of the day and what we learned together from the initial analysis of the soil samples that we took and looked at under the microscope. Isa does a wonderful job of explaining in simple terms the incredible range of life and activity that can be seen in this form of analysis, as well as what it means in practical terms. She also shares her learnings and impressions from looking at soil samples from farms all over the region and what it means for the work ahead for the farmers who manage that soil. Now, I won't give too much away, and instead I'll hand things over now to Isadora Schmidt. Let's start just by talking about what we did today, because we just wrapped up some microscopy analysis of soil samples that we did, and this is coming towards the end of baseline metrics that I've been getting from this farm before I really start with any management. So we went to the different parts down first by the pasture, then up to the triangle plot, which is where I'm starting the market garden. We took a control from a pretty healthy part of the forest next to the river. And then we came to one area that had what is essentially compost that I had put and planted berries on top of to give us, as much as I can tell, a pretty broad overview of the different, they're not different types of soil, but different things that have been done and the differences that you might find in ecosystem zones of this quite varied little plot that I have here on my farm. And tell me about the process and what we've been doing since then to take a deeper look into these samples.
We haven't seen all of them yet.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So I could only tell you what we've seen up until now. We took samples from all these different places, and these different places, they're supposed to have different management styles, I suppose. I don't know. They're going to grow differently, right?
Yeah.
And so Yeah. So what have we seen? We saw the pastures, right? We saw the microbiology in the pastures, and what we actually are, what are we able to see with a microscope? We can see the microbiome that is active at the moment, and we can also see a little bit of the texture, a little bit of whatever is dormant or not dormant. And we saw a system there that is beginning to be activated. We didn't see a lot of life. We didn't see a lot of things. We didn't see a full, complete soil food web in there. But we did begin to see aggregates and some aggregations and yeah, and I think we didn't see any amoebas in that one, did we? I don't remember.
No, not in the one from the pasture. I
Not in
don't
the
think we
pasture.
saw any amoebas there. I think you identified a couple of cysts.
Yes,
That,
there were flagellate
for flagellate
cysts.
cysts.
There were a lot of flagellate cysts, that's right.
Let's start maybe by giving an overview of some of the vocabulary we're going to be using here. No, I mean for me too, because though I may understand that these are different forms of life in the soil, let's go a little bit deeper into that and what it tells us to see them present or absent.
Okay, so yeah, the idea behind the soil food web is, yeah, there are many different organisms in soil, right? And they all have different functions. And just like any kind of ecosystem, they all have their own purpose. And we need a lot different types. And according to Dr. Elaine Ingham, yeah, she's the one I think that popularized that word, soil food web, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and so we start with bacteria, we have fungi, then we have protozoa, which are the predators of the soil. They're gonna eat bacteria, they're gonna eat organic matter, and inside this protozoa there are flagellates, amoeba, and ciliates.
Mm-hmm.
Those are three big types of it. And then we have nematodes, which most people don't like to see them because they had quite a bad rep in agricultural soils. Because when we actually see them, it's because they're creating a problem. They talk
So
about,
people mostly see the symptoms of them rather than identifying the different types there might be.
Because there's many different types of nematodes. They can eat bacteria, they can eat themselves, they can eat fungi, they can switch around, but the only ones that we talked about up until now was root feeders.
Yeah.
And they're
That
not,
damage the roots of the crops you're trying to...
exactly, they're not so much fun to have. But there's so many other beautiful nematodes. In fact, we saw a huge one.
Yeah, we did. We got to... I'll try and put some of the photos and the videos that we got from today as reference as to what this looks like, because it's kind of hard to see it if you haven't seen it before.
It's a micro world, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, so that I think that's the lingo. I think it's just bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes basically are the main groups that we see in microscopic levels. We need to use a microscope to see it, or else we won't be able to see it. And yeah.
One of the things that I've been surprised in this is, usually when you're looking at a macro level at things, they're not transparent. And whereas here, like you're looking at a nematode or a flagellate or something, and you're seeing right through its body, you can actually see what it has eaten. And that's remarkable.
That is super cool. They are translucent. Yeah, and we use a shadowing microscope to do that. That's the only handicap I think we have with that microscope. It needs to have a condenser that will create the shadows so you can actually see and play around with that. And you get to see what they eat, you get to see their mouth parts, their stomach. I think we identified a nematode, a male nematode. Yeah. And
identifying a male part of the interior of a nematode.
Exactly, inside the nematode. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah, and bacteria are really small. So they're the hardest one to see because 1 micrometer is just a little dot.
Yeah.
So that's hard. But they're supposed to have, the ones that move, they're supposed to have flagellum as well. They're supposed to have like little arms, little...
Sure. Kind of the way they're illustrated in your science books, right?
Yeah, exactly. Little strings that makes them move around, but we can't see them with this. We need an electron microscope.
Right.
Those are cool, but those are expensive too.
So let's take another step back, and why don't you tell me about how you got into analyzing soil? Where did this interest start, and how did your training progress to get to this point?
Yeah, I think like most city dweller, like I was a city person as well, but things didn't make a lot of sense. You're always looking to be in nature and to do other things, and you're spending all this time in your work, and this feeling I need to get home and disconnect. It's just like, it doesn't make any sense. Why do I have to spend 10 hours a day trying to disconnect? So little by little, I think to make the long story short, permaculture found me. And that was wonderful because those were things that I was already thinking about. I was thinking about how to connect all these things. And there was this whole system already established that talked about, it's an engineering, it's knowing a lot of things in permaculture. And I thought it was really cool. And at that point, I was beginning to think, okay, now I need to turn my life around. I need to dedicate myself to this. But I couldn't really find a practical way to make money out of permaculture.
Sure. A lot of people struggle with that. Yeah.
Yeah, unless you have land and you want to isolate yourself from the world, which is cool too. That was an idea.
There's that whole population.
It was kind of, I think, the feeling back then, but not really. But yeah, it could be. But it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So somehow I found regenerative agriculture, which I thought it had a much more pragmatic point of view. I didn't know about agroecology then, but it had a better idea of, okay, we can adapt this. I can go to a farmer and I can use this, instead of, that part of your farm is not too close to your house and you need to change things. Like it was a more structured.
It was much more of a design perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. So it made a lot of sense. But while I was doing regenerative agriculture, which was awesome, I realized that if I don't really understand soil, I'm really don't know what I'm doing. And that's when I found Dr. Elaine Needham and I fell in love in a way. You fall in love with all your mentors. And she has a beautiful way of putting information out there, and information that not always is, you have easy access to it because it's complicated.
Sure.
It requires a lot of academic behind it. And she has simplified and made it very accessible for a lot of people. So yeah, and then I just went for it. And after that, of course, you find other mentors and you find other levels, other layers, because it's a very simplified idea, which honestly, I think everyone should know what she talks about, what she teaches, the foundation of the soil food web. Like kids in school should have that. Yeah. Everyone, because it's fundamental and it's really great. And so you begin to understand a little bit more of the soil and microscopes. It's a really nice tool. It's a tool like any other. It has its limitations and it's not perfect, but it gives me a good broad view of what's going on and what can I do after this. So yeah, so that was kind of it.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
So it's interesting because I would say probably upwards of 50 or more % of the people that I have interviewed, whether it is specifically about something permaculture related or not, got into what their now specialty is through permaculture first. Cool. And it's also interesting to hear how other specialists in soil health or adjacent practices started with the soil food web courses as well. Mm-hmm. And it's much like you just said as well, that it's a great place to start, and then you use that as a base to expand your learning based on your interests, where you have some open questions. And that's been a lot of what you and I have been talking about today, as we've observed things under the microscope, as we've gone through the process of, what it is to give this service almost like a consultation. What do you do with the results that you find, and how does that turn into not just data points that you regurgitate, but a story of what is happening in the soil and what can be done to achieve results? Tell me about where you're at with that, because this has become a career path for you now.
Yeah, it's true. There's many ways to look at this, because first of all, your clients, the people that you're working with, are used to numbers. Want to see that number.
We're talking mostly about farmers here.
Farmers, sorry, yeah. Yes. Farmers, they, when they send a lab test, they want to see that level of nitrogen. They want to see...
They get their stats, they get their sheet. Yeah,
exactly. No. Because for them, it's easier to see if they're getting better or worse with that number, which I understand. Okay, this is when you work in research as well.
And it's not invalid, but it's a snapshot of one part.
You need to have a reference. Mm-hmm. But I think people are missing the point that everything is a partial view of everything. We don't have a tool that has a 3D perspective of things. Mm-hmm. So we're really just looking at one perspective. We might be missing some information, and we can just rely on those numbers for them to go forward, move. There's a lot of other things that are involved. So yeah. So what can we do with the? Sorry, I got lost here.
No worries.
What can we do with the test, right? I think it will depend on what the person is really, what a person wants, because I can do numbers. I can take microscopy and do soil food web style and get you biomass numbers.
And spit that stat sheet out.
Exactly. We can do that. And that, like I told you before, it will be working with the F2B ratio, with the fungal to bacterial ratio, which is a reference table that is out there that explains a little bit how succession works, right? That each plant, depending on the type of plant, will need a certain F2B ratio to work in a more natural state.
Yeah, maybe let's explain that a little bit too. Like, as an ecosystem moves through advanced successions, let's say it starts from bare rock and just the minimal forms of life like lichens and bacteria that start to metabolize that into soil. And we move forward from that maybe into simple grasslands, into shrublands, into early stage succession forest, into mature forest. And it's not always just a linear way. But anyway, this is how we can frame that, right?
Yeah, so we always start with a more bacterial dominated soil, and little by little, as time passes, as conditions change, you get to a more fungal dominated soil. If you're talking old growth forest, will be 100, 1,000 more fungal biomass than bacterial biomass.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about pasture crops, or which will be a 1-1, or so the biomass, I think, works if you're working with this reference in your mind, right? Because this is, what is your goal? What do you have? Do you have vineyards? Do you have olive trees? Do you have brassicas? Then you look for that, and then you have a reference of what you need to reach, because people are used to chemical tests. I look at the nitrogen in my soil. It's this. How much do I need to produce this? I have to add this, So it's easy math for everyone to work with.
Yep, you get a recipe.
You get a recipe, exactly. And I think with soil microbes, it's just so unknown. It's so hard to do this.
That's another aspect of this, right? Like, this study is quite in its infancy, and there are discoveries being made all the time. There are tons of aspects that are unknown.
Correct.
Yeah, so this is almost as much of an art as a science in this early stage.
I think so. And again, I think what Dr. Elaine managed to get is an oversimplification of something so you can work with something.
Yeah. So you're not overwhelmed by the complexity of it.
Exactly. And we're not being precise with things, we're just getting a reading. So I really think the qualitative reading of it is worth a lot more than the quantitative, which more than the numbers. It's just, when you see more than 1,000 soils, you begin to see patterns, you begin to see things that, little details that will give you clues, like, do you see dormancy stages? No, yes, that's important. Do you see spores? No, yes. How many different types of amoeba do you see? These are all important little clues that you get. And then it begins to tell you a story. If this is working or not working, But yeah, I think it's a little bit more important to perhaps read on those little clues than to
just get the stats.
Just to get numbers, exactly.
Yeah. So this was also part of our conversation, is like, a larger perspective and context is very useful when you are looking at these things under a microscope. How has the soil been managed? What are they trying to grow there? What is the climate like where this is coming from? What are the tools available to manage? And bring that into a story of what is happening with the soil, because any given analysis is a snapshot of a dynamic ecosystem. We were talking about this too, that many of the aspects that we are observing are highly changeable and variable. And for the fact that we are looking at the soil samples from my farm today after 3 days of pretty consistent rain might be telling us a whole lot that would not be present under these analyses had it been dry for a week before this, right? True. There's so many factors that create a momentary snapshot that isn't to say, this is what my soil is. It's saying this is what the life in the substrate is expressing under these conditions right now, this year, today.
Exactly. So I think it's really important to put together either different tools or your observational capacity too, because you need to be able to see the plants that you're working with. Do they look okay? Just look, or put a shovel on the ground also, and see how it feels. You need to put a lot of different perspectives together for you to, because you can't just I took a reading today. Maybe today we have full of nematodes or whatever.
Yeah.
So everything bloomed out because of water. And then you think, oh, my soil is great. I'm not going to do anything about it because it's going on itself.
Yeah.
And it's not really like this. So you do need to be a little bit more coherent with this. Yeah.
So that was tricky too, because, we haven't finished the analysis. We kind of went through pretty quickly today. We didn't actually look at all the samples that we took, but going back to the one that we got from the pasture, right? We saw very few indicators of life in there. For reference, almost all of the soil that I have around here is predominantly decomposed granite sand. That's tough. There's not a whole lot for either as far as organic matter for microbes to digest or to feed off of, the things that would make for habitat. I mean, it's a tough environment to live in, chunky pieces of granite. And so understandably, that pasture sample with, I don't know, maybe 2 centimeters of what we could call organic matter soil on top of it did not show a lot of life in the analysis. But at the same time, I'm seeing perennial grasses established there, some of which are about chest height for me, and I'm 6 foot tall, almost 180 centimeters. And so I'm trying to do the quick conversion. What is that in centigrade? So there are conflicting observations right now that would say, okay, the soil is really struggling. You're probably not going to see some of the better growth conditions, but above ground, there are pretty good indications that the pasture is not struggling. Again, we've gotten a lot more rain this spring than we did the previous one. And I know that some of that growth is due to the extra moisture. So there really is a larger context, a story that needs to be told with some of these analyses that we do.
Yeah, and I think also in the case of microscopy, the thing is that we're working with statistics. We're working with small points, and we're looking at grams of soil, right? And even though, there's many studies that we can get a representativeness of what's going on, no, but it could also be this, that the sampling method is not correct. There are better ways to do it. I don't know. But it's true. I look at your pasture and it's beautiful.
It's doing pretty good right now.
It looks really nice and it looks like it's working. But that's kind of the feeling that I got in the soil. We didn't see the whole soil food web.
Sure.
I couldn't find it, but it wasn't a mess. It wasn't an unstructured soil that sometimes I get to see in some agriculture soils, that you just see mineral particles just spread out together. Separated, and you don't really see anything. And here we begin to see some aggregation. There's some colors, which I'm not sure. I've never seen this kind of sand soil before. Maybe it's natural color, but maybe there is already some kind of process going on behind that I don't quite understand. So so it is important. I agree with you totally that any kind of test that you do, you need to be, first of all, you need to know the question. What are you trying to ask?
Yeah.
You need to also see, if when you choose a test, a tool, understand its limitations, understand its forces, whatever the best things that could come out of it, and understand your limitation in your resources and time and machinery and everything, because you're going to have to create an action out of this. Like, okay, you have this information now, Oliver. What are you going to do with your soil?
Yeah, yeah. And this is something that I am really looking forward to continue a conversation with you along for years to come, because this is something that I would like to repeat periodically each year that gives us an insight into how things are changing over different seasons. The nice thing is that I have so many other data points and areas of analysis that I am comparing with this that go together with the microscopy.
Cool. Yeah.
I have really good data on, weather and how that is corresponding with what we're seeing underground. I have been doing now a lot of samples with everything from, refractometers for the health of the plants up above in Brix readings. We've done compaction tests. Alongside with the microscopy, we were doing wet slake for aggregates in each one of these same areas. And we're doing it with controls. So, we took samples from the undisturbed forest to see how that compares. It's the same substrate underneath, but it's... that's one we haven't looked at yet. I can't wait to see what the results and how they compare to the others are. Yeah. And I think this is important to kind of the whole point that we're trying to make here, is that no one analysis can give you conclusive results of what's really happening. And I've said this before on the show too, that I really think regeneration is about the relationships and the connections between things, not the individual elements themselves. And in this case, this is being worked out from what correlation do we see between compaction rates and presence of microbiology in the soil? What does that tell us or correspond with our observations of plant health up above? Because in some areas I'm actively managing it, like in the garden currently, we've got everything from tomatoes to potatoes and peppers and everything. Yeah. The pasture I have not managed at all yet. I haven't even put animals in that area. I don't have fences up yet. We're getting to it. And so with different forms of management, it's going to be really cool to see with this similar substrate, the granite sand, how it responds to different impacts, to different inputs, to different forms of management.
Yeah, it's cool. I think I might be shooting myself in the foot here, but we talked about this as well, that sometimes we don't really need any tests. The answer, we can figure things out. The answer pretty much is always the same, is think about ecosystem, right? So it doesn't really matter or how you look, but it's super cool to keep track of those little things because it gives us a little pat in the back, like a little comfort of, okay, because it's hard work. It's not easy. We are in a point that some soils are really degraded and we just lost a lot of knowledge and I think, and confidence and connection with those things. And it takes time for things to kick off. And sometimes using a microscope, having this microscopic view of what's going on down there, it's great because the efforts that you put last year that you thought it was like, man, am I questioning my mental health here because I don't know what I'm doing? You're building thermophilic piles that takes, lots of turns, heavy weight, or you're doing teas every week. It's every week you have to brew it, you have to add this and that. It's hard work. And then you get to see it like in the first 6 months, So maybe it's more about this, it's more about, and sometimes we need those tests as well to show others. Yeah. Right? Because we're not making this change only for ourselves, we're making for everyone, for people to repeat what we're doing, to make it better what we're doing. And I think, so it's important all this. But honestly, I think the concept is always the same, is keep the ground covered, diversity.
There's some basic principles you can't go wrong with.
Exactly. But coming from a more productive point of view, because we're talking about agriculture, I like to work with farmers a lot, with growers. It's more complicated than that because they are coming from a monoculture, it's a desert out there for them because they're planting trees with nothing underground and they're all together. There's no variety and they're coming from a really bad starting point, from a really weak soil. Yeah. So, and also a plant that is not meant to be there.
Yeah. Tell me what you mean by that, because we've talked about it already, but it ties into what we were talking about, succession.
Yeah. A lot of times we're trying to grow things that are not native to the area that it's there, or it's not really ready to be grown in that kind of soil because, as we said before, soils have a natural succession. Soils, when we talk about soils, it's the biome in it, it's the environment next to it, and that gives space for a certain type of plant to grow. And we're kind of forcing that. We're bringing vineyards, we're bringing vines to a place and planting it there because we want it there, and they're all together, and we're forcing them to grow a specific way. And we're tilling the soil when we're cleaning up, herbs, grass, because we think it's going to compete with it. And so we're creating really harsh circumstances for them to grow. And
that's a perfect example. Anything agroforestry related, right? If you're doing that, which generally represents usually a mid to later level succession when you're going for mature trees, especially delicate ones that are what we consider to be high production varieties. Even if they are hardy ones, like let's say olives or almonds, which are quite common around here because the climate is quite harsh, especially in summers, and a lot of the more delicate trees that need a lot of water struggle unless they're irrigated. They still represent something that usually gets established in, similarly, middle to later succession developed soils. True. But like you said, the way that the soils are being managed with these does not correspond to the level of succession that they should be in. They're being managed more like their early succession pasture grasses and forbs, which are really antithetical to the health of later to mid succession trees.
Yeah, it's kind of, we're forcing a system. We're trying to put a squared key in a round hole.
Yeah. And then we wonder why they get pest pressure and
Exactly.
diseases, and
Exactly.
they need extra irrigation.
Exactly. And
They're not matched with the right conditions to grow them well.
so we're fighting against the system. That's true. And that's the complicated part. And then we create dependencies. And now those last few years, with wars going on and any other things, we learned about these dependencies more than ever, because a lot of people don't have the money to get the fertilizers, or maybe the laws have changed because they're also putting pressures that you're not supposed to buy this certain kind of seeds. You have to buy the ecological seeds, and so they can put a cover crop now, or else they're going to lose their subsidies. And things get a little complicated for the food, in the food production. So we need to be talking about this, and we need to be helping them transition or find a way that they can actually, make a decent living out of it. And also, I think we mentioned this before, it was the idea that we also expecting so much from them. We're expecting so much from the productions because we're used to having these plants on IV, basically.
On life support.
On life support.
Yeah.
And they're not supposed to produce like that.
Yeah.
And we are producing so, I think this is the years that we're producing so much quantity, but it's such horrible quality.
Yes.
And everyone is sick. And, nutritionally speaking, we're not really, there's nothing, it's empty, and it's quite sad because we have this capacity of producing so much with such little quality to it. And I think maybe we should go back around it again, and try to find less production, but more quality to it.
This goes back to what you were saying before, is like knowing the question that you're asking in an analysis. If your question is, how much can I produce by weight? Then just pump it full of hormones and chemicals and water and just get it to swell up and be absolutely devoid of any value and nutrients inside. And that is really what most, at least industrial agriculture, has optimized for up to this point. And this is why we see these symptoms ripple through the rest of health. And
True.
When you start to bring up the conversation of why don't we focus on quality, even if that means reducing in quantity, you get an immediate pushback of, we need the quantity to continue to feed a growing population. And it's like, do we want a fed population or do we want a nourished population? Because those are two very different things. And it's two different production methods that is going to achieve that.
True. And if we actually look at the food production, we have so much food waste. There's so much
that
food
too.
that is wasted that it's just not even funny.
Which is something of a system or a symptom of an overproduced commodity.
Yes.
Right? It's not valued.
And not only that, we have a lot of people who are still starving.
Yep.
And that's even worse because we are very privileged. We live in abundance right here. But there's still a lot of people who are starving in the day of today. So it's true. It's true. We don't need more quantity. We need quality for sure. And we need people to
equity.
Value quality. Yes.
Yeah.
To value that.
So that we actually use the quantity that we do have intelligently and with value.
True. And we need it's I think it's a push and pull from many areas, from producers that need to be proud of their work, and also consumers who need to be very aware of what they're putting, what they're buying, what they're supporting when they do this, because it's important to question those things, Ram, to make a change.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier about having seen maybe 1,000 or more different types of soils under a microscope at this point and having concluded, I at least observed certain patterns from that. Give me an insight into some of the patterns that have emerged. And are most of the soils that you've seen from around our local area here in Catalonia, or have you seen samples from all over the world now?
The world is a big world. I don't think...
Fair enough.
I haven't gone that far. I've seen a little bit from Portugal and from different parts of Spain and France. And so that's...
So mostly centered in this region where we're at.
Arid.
Of Western Spain,
Portugal was very nice. It was very nice.
Yeah, you're saying up in the north when they get like 1,000 millimeters of rain a year.
It was weird because I didn't know how I was so accustomed to this very arid system here. Because when I went there, I was just like, oh my God, look at these trees, look at these leaves. And
it's a jungle out here.
It is. Because I live next to, in a place and we pretty much have pine trees. Yeah. Pine trees everywhere. And So I've seen soils a little bit, not everywhere, but I've seen a lot of different soils. I mostly see farmers production systems, but I like to walk around and go with my little handy kit and get samples from any kind of forest system you can find. It's always nice because you need to have referrals. I do have a lot of microscopy crisis, I have to admit, in a sense that sometimes I see nothing and I get really scared and I wonder if I'm doing something wrong.
Sure.
And it's just that the system is abused. We're treating a chronic illness, something that is chronically ill. And
what are we talking about here? Mostly soils that have been tilled and sprayed endlessly?
I'm not talking about nothing horrible because most people that come to me, they're trying to do things right, but it takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And I think it will depend a lot on that budget that you have, that effort that you have, the speed that you're going to get things to move. So it just takes time. So I see a lot of things that are just very empty and I get a little scared. And I also always question my own, if I'm doing this correctly.
Sure. If it's actually empty or you're just not properly observing it.
If I'm not properly observing, I'm not properly sampling. But that's why I like to look at forest soils. And I like to go around. And I know I'm not expecting growers to have the same soil as a forest, obviously, but I like to see what kind of feeling do I have when I see in a forest soil, because I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a feeling. Like when we saw compost, you saw a lot of things, right? Did you get just too much?
And this is not ideal, well prepared, optimized compost. This is literally poorly decomposed cow manure from a conventional dairy farm next to me. That's what I had access to. Well, so it gives reference.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't a compost that you prepared,
I didn't turn it. I didn't add a certain ratio of anything. No.
Exactly. You just kind of left it over there and it was decomposing, but it's a good compost. It was full of life.
It was full.
We had like 5-6 amoebas per field of view.
Yeah.
That's protozoa. Those are predators. They're going to eat the bacteria. It's highly bacterial too. But you had nematodes, you had flagellates, you had amoebas, you had a big group over there of predators. They're going to stimulate your nutrient cycling. It's going to get the party started. So that's pretty good. So compost is chaotic. It's just like it's a crazy world, like everything is just moving at 1 meters per hour. And then you see forest soils and it tends to, I listen to music comes in my head because it's just, there's a harmony to it. You see those beautiful aggregates over there. Those beautiful Haifa crossing, everything is just magical and it's in perfect synchronicity, I think. There's spaces and there's voids and there's holes and there's something that fills up everything. And when you see unstructured soils who had a lot of disturbances, like tilling or chemical disturbances, there is no structure, there's no base, there's no foundation to create any kind of civilization for any kind of life. So it takes time and it's hard.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I see with our agricultural soils. No matter how hard we try, generally speaking, not everyone.
There's exceptions, yeah.
Obviously, but it takes a lot of time to get there, and I'm yet to see that unicorn, that beautiful, balanced soil in an agricultural field. And I'm sure they are because I haven't seen much, Okay. But it's very different. So I like to prime my eyes. I have a lot of websites and a lot of books that I download with just images and then live samples like this from specific places that you see. And then you're like, oh my God, this looks beautiful. When you're walking in the forest and suddenly your feet are like very spongy. Everything feels different. Those are the best ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see magic there. So it's not easy.
No, but I would imagine too that aside from the patterns that you see under the microscope, you've probably seen patterns in what you can observe with your own senses to the ones that are highly alive and active and those which are mostly dead substrates. What are some of the sensations, the observations that one could make without having to have this kit that could at least give you some indications where it is on a scale between dead and healthy?
One of the things is the bounciness, I think, we're going to an extreme. The sponginess of when you step on something, it doesn't feel harsh or like the surface of the moon that you just, or walking in the sand, like
dusty
the beach,
or dead,
that you're just walking and everything falls apart. It's hard for you to take a step forward. That's just unstructured. There's nothing there to hold anything together.
Yeah.
We are definitely looking for those aggregates And unfortunately, we cannot sell aggregates on the bottom. Aggregates are made with microbes. Microbes are the ones who make it, and they need to be there. So if it's not there, it's because the microbes are not there. They don't have enough to make their work, you know. And so we're looking for that structure. I think also life, just looking around and seeing bugs, insects, birds. It's always a reflection of everything that is happening around it, right?
Sure. From the micro to the macro, it expresses if you don't have diversity and presence of life in your soil, you're probably not going to see a huge diversity and presence of life above it either.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if it's super like one and the other, you know, they come together, but it's something that you always notice. When things are working, you see more life for sure. Yeah. Today, when we were in your garden, there were so many different types of bugs crawling around.
There's a lot of insects in the garden, that's true.
And that was super cool to see, you know, different sizes. And now we see the importance of insects, pollinators. And it's so important that they're there. It's important to have flowers around it for them as well, to have spaces for them to hide and be there. So yeah, I think seeing life, a soil that it also smells good, right?
Definitely. I was going to say, if you weren't, that's one of the ones that I really connect with. I can smell healthy compost, you know. Forest soils are my reference.
Yeah.
And whether or not there's much fragrance in the ground or around it, and also the sounds that corresponds with the life. Like I always listen for birds. Yeah. May not be directly connected with the soil. They're more up in the air, but they, like you said, they tend to pattern out.
Yeah, and they are taxi cabs for those microbes because you know, it's much easier to fly on a bird's feet than, you know, to travel through the soil that is dry and hard and harsh. There's always someone trying to eat you. It's a doggy dog world over there, you know. And have you smelled bad soils?
Yes. Yeah, like putrid ones that have gone stagnant and anaerobic.
But devoid of life.
Or anaerobic.
They smell like sand.
The ones that just have no smell.
Construction work.
Yep.
You know? It smells like a construction
I've been around enough
site.
Construction sites. Yes, I have that as reference.
It smells like that. Yeah, it smells like when someone is doing something in your house, and that's So those are things that we should look for it. I think
definitely
use our senses. Don't lick soil, please.
I know people who do that though too, and they check for acidity that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know.
It's another level.
I'm not sure.
Gotta calibrate all those senses.
To each its own.
Yeah. So between the patterns of what you've observed, have you started to observe patterns in practices that lead to or correspond with health in the microbiome in the soil? You know, there's so many out there. Some of them have become really popular, like let's say additions of biochar or compost teas, which I know you work very closely with, or no-till systems. Have you seen close correspondence with any certain practices and better readings of microbiome?
I think it all depends on the context. I don't think there is an absolute answer to that, but if I have to put my finger, one thing will be mulching.
Okay.
Mulching.
Any specific type? Because that's also quite a range of possibilities.
I see a lot of people working with wood now, wood mulching.
Yep, wood chips.
Yeah, wood chips. But I think any kind of mulching works. Because I think
your straws, your leaf litter.
I think so. I think that creates such an environment for life to begin and to thrive. And I think that maybe could be one consistent thing that I see that works really well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, you know, I love the idea of cover crops, but I think at least what I've observed in other people, and my knowledge is still very limited on that. I still look, when I have my free time, I still go look for special types of bacteria and fungi and things like this. But I want to learn more about cover crops, but I don't think we know enough yet. So I don't see the best results when we just put cover crops without much thought into it. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly.
Yeah, but also just like mulch, there's a wide range of what you can do with cover crops, right? I honestly think people jump to conclusion that any cover crop is going to get a result, exactly. And then maybe they put one or two species in it.
And
instead of like the
it's
15 to 20 that might get a very different result.
And they're not even looking at that soil succession that we were talking about.
Sure,
either,
yeah.
You know, so
and what they're planting, whether that's appropriate for where they're planting.
Yeah, they're just mixing, well, because the guy next door is doing this. And, you know, or because I saw a video on YouTube of this guy
how to design a cover crop
in Michigan doing that. And, you know, and I'm like, okay. So because I've seen... there was a study that I was part of, and they did mulching. It was a veggie garden. They did mulching in one side. They planted vegetables right after doing cover crops, and they cut it down, you know, they incorporated, and then there was a control group. And that one was not the best soil regarding biology. It was good, but compared to the other two, even the control one, which is just normal with the broad for, it wasn't... Something happened there. I think we touched too much. I don't know. So I think it has to do with what you plant, how you get rid of, or how you make it, you know, make it dormant. I don't know. And it has too much information there that we're not really thinking about it. So, but yeah, covering the soil and mulching give really good results. What else do you see?
Do you suspect that's mostly because it helps to keep the temperature lower and retain moisture? Or it gives a food source as it breaks down? Is it kind of all of the above?
Yeah, I think it's all of the above. I mean, we have to understand we live here in a very arid system, right? I mean, not you
typically
beautifully green here, full of plants and water.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a more of an arid thing. And so covering anything will create, you're going to get the morning dew working.
Yep.
We have a lot and we have to work with that. And
in some seasons, that could be the majority source of moisture.
Yeah. And then putting a food source, because as you know, agriculture is a very extractive system. We're not compensating from what we take away.
Yeah.
And that's always lacking for them. That kind of, you know, returnable food for everyone over there, for that system. So I think it's everything. I'm not so sure, but it's everything. And I've seen really good results in very little time with no added water, because some people say, no, you need water. It's going to dry up everything. I've seen good results with just no added water, a nice big mulch. And if you have diversity of woods, even better, you know, because some people, I'm scared because I only have pine trees. The resin is going to acidify my soil. I don't want to say that it's not going to do it, but I've seen really good results, you know, in certain circumstances. So it's not something to be scared of either.
I agree. I've read enough about different types, especially wood mulches. There's a really good book called the Wood Chip Handbook, actually. Yeah. And it goes through the whole range. Yeah, very specific. And at least from what I've heard from that guy's research is that the pine wood, I guess, worries that come with adding acidity to your soil are largely overblown. And that as it starts to break down, there's the one about where, like, it's because it is such a high carbon source, it can extract nitrogen from a system if not mixed properly or given enough time to break down. But over time, it will equalize, find balance or whatever.
And look, if you know this, you can work with that too.
Yeah.
If you know that temporarily, temporarily, you know that might be a problem, you can just add some extra nitrogen in there. You can put blood meal, you can use, chicken, whatever.
Yeah.
So you can work with that as well. But you know that this is going into the biomass of your microbes. And that's going to return to you eventually too, So it doesn't have to be a problem. It's going to be a solution in the long run, because we have to start thinking about the long run all the time. Yeah. We just think about the now of this season, what I'm going to get for this season, and we need to think about the long run. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned about the pine tree, because for composting, I really like my mentor, and when I had a mentor, we used to talk about pine needles. Some people hate it.
Yeah. Pinaza,
effectivamente. They're incredible source of protozoa. So it's really nice to add them in, especially the one that is laying down on the soil and everything. Sure. And always, get half a bucket, little handful of it. It's always a good thing to add into your compost if you're doing it. So.
I think a lot of the stereotypes or the worries about these products or different treatments come from doing them wrong. Yeah. So if you're going to add a ton of pine wood chips, it's probably going to acidify, especially in the short term. If you're going to put a half a foot of pine needle mulch on top of something, that's extreme. That's going to really shift the balance of things. if you do it in a lighter way, mixed with other things, your chances are you're going to get a more balanced result as well.
That's true. We're lacking coherence.
Yeah.
And understanding I think we're so used to this reductionist point of view.
It's one thing or another. It can't be.
And we forget that
we have a gradient.
We need all this, we need all this to work. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So in the short time that I've known you, but thanks to some great chats over car rides to different visits, I know you as someone who is obsessively learning all the time, bringing in new points of view, connecting with new mentors. It's something I really admire about you in general. Tell me about some of the areas now that you are inspired by. Where do you find, your inspiration lights up and that you're really curious to learn more?
Yeah, it's cool, man. I think we live in a really cool time and age now with so much information and this idea of connectedness and we're connecting everything, but it gets overwhelming, huh? Sometimes I just need to stop
and process something that's come in already.
Exactly. Because it gets out of hand. But I mean, coming from the Soil Food Web School, that's the only beef I have with them. The day of today, they still separate the good and the bad, the aerobic and the anaerobic.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand where that idea is coming from, because there's some horrible things that have done that create certain anaerobic putrefaction kind of microbes.
Full of pathogens and
exactly.
Really dangerous stuff.
Exactly. I understand where it's coming from, but I really like to explore that area of biofertilizers and anaerobic microbes, because I think it's fascinating, like KNF and Jadam and all those things. I think and lactobacillus and all those things that a lot of people are working with them. So I think I like to explore a lot that area and try to understand how it works and when it's working. When is it making better? When is not working? Because it all has.
Yeah, where's the tipping point, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, there's a niche for everyone, and I don't think there's right or wrong. I think you just need to understand what you're doing, what you have in your hands, and the potential of it. But yeah, the anaerobics are something that I really like. There's a little group of us together that we keep sending scientific papers to each other, and just oh, did you see this? And then I have friends that we keep making little experiments with it and just seeing how it works, how it makes it better. And it's something that I really like. Yeah, I love anaerobics right now. Yeah, and lots of other things. But yeah, like you said, it's a disease. I think I don't stop. Yeah, because it's so much fun and there's so much to find out. And I think it's a cool thing, because it keeps you humble.
Yeah.
It keeps you on your toes. And and you listen more. You get to ask more questions and listen to people more, because you think you always have something to learn from everyone. And yeah.
Definitely. Well, maybe one day we'll actually do what we've been talking about since I met you and start a Spanish podcast in order to get some of these amazing people in our local community and around the peninsula kind of highlight their work and their ideas. We'll see. You and I are both overworked already. I can barely keep up with this project. But there are some really inspiring things happening all around us.
There's some beautiful projects happening here in Spain, in Catalonia mostly, because we talk to people in the north part of Spain. And they're like, oh my God, I envy you guys so much. So there's a lot of infrastructure behind this. There's a lot of brilliant people. They're doing a lot of great things. And and it's super cool if we could share this with them and get them connected and together. Because
we do have some great resources here. One thing that I think we do particularly well is the education system that is open to this. Your own collaboration with the Escola Agrícola in Manresa, where you live, has kind of this agroecology wing that I know you're closely associated with and helping them run experiments for. Tell me about your relationship there.
Those are just ag schools, though. That's not the university. The university is still pretty much
that is true. Fair enough.
Old-fashioned kind of. But still, I'm super happy that they have opened this. They have been doing this for many years now.
Mm-hmm. And there's a network around Catalonia. Manresa is just one of the central ones.
Exactly.
I know they have one in the Pyrenees.
There's about 12 at Catalonia. Yeah.
And really innovative stuff. I've even seen programs on like horse traction management.
Exactly.
Really cool stuff.
They're really open, and they're great people, and they put together great courses and affordable as well, because they're, part of the government pays for it. and they're all different because it depends on the person, the people.
They're
who are running
very appropriately focused for the bioregion that they kind of represent.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the ones in
There's one Delta de Ebro and that unique ecosystem down there.
Exactly. So, but it's they in the one that I know more. They were close to where I live. It's in Manresa. They have a field called Campo Coli, where they do tests. They have the kids there doing tests, and they have cereals. They have veggie gardens. They have vineyards. They have sheep.
Yep.
And they do everything. And one of the people who was running it, who is still running it, he also loved microscopy. And so when we met, we clicked right away. And that was a lot of fun. He even built his own tea brewer.
Nice.
So he's like, okay, so I have to make it oval shape is the best shape. And then he made with fiberglass but they are overwhelmed with everything because they do so much. And they also have La Asociación Lera, which it's a branch that came out of that, and they do brilliant things. Now this year, they just started a new kind of a network of everyone that is already doing regenerative. And they're putting together people have been doing for a few years with people who want to do it. And they do demos. And then bringing people from France, they're bringing people from other parts of Spain. And they have talks and they inspire people and they help and they put together the professional, people the experts with it. And I think they gave a lot of support, and I think this is really super cool.
Yeah, Lera also does a lot for protecting heritage seed breeds and has a great seed catalog that I've been getting for the garden here. It's going to start some landrace.
And then, so we have this, and there's the Charcolan also. There's a lot of these entities in here. They are worried about local and, the seeds, the environment, how they're teaching growers who have land and how to manage their own forest, how to manage the woods, and so that's really cool, and how to use that in their own system. So they do have a lot of support. It's still hard because we still have a culture legacy, we have patterns and we have our own fears and we have our own economic, needs. It's not so easy, but there's a lot of people who are excited and we're getting a lot of more people excited. So I think it's a good start.
Yeah, there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. There's incredible work being done in this area. And you've done a fantastic job of bringing a lot of people in this space together. You've got get together in October that you're starting to put together with the Soil Food Web Network in this region. And
for me, again, I think we talked about this. Regenerative agriculture is not just about plants. It's about us. It's about us getting back together with, priorities.
The cultural aspect of agriculture, right?
Yeah, priorities, life, So when I went through the Soil Food Web School, it was hard because I felt really alone. It's, it's American system.
You take it remotely.
Yeah, you take it remotely. And even though you have one-to-one sessions and everything, but it was hard because everything is new and it's set up for a different system. And as I began to get more field experience on my own and having, I experienced a lot of fear and I had to go through that. And I said, okay, maybe it doesn't have to be this way for everyone, And I started reaching out to a lot of students that were, in Spain and then in Europe. And now we get together once a year and we calibrate our knowledge and we try to I try to create activities for everyone field activities because, with reality and talk to growers and a lot of growers in the area. So we go visit a farm. We learn how to take samples from a 7-hectare field, and then we have microscopy sessions, and then we talk about the different projects. And this year we're bringing in a lot of people together. Hopefully you can come too and explain to us, your project to everyone. I think it's wonderful and beautiful. But people who are in the research department or already have their own business, the ups and downs, the legal part of it, if they need any kind of help, support on software, even things like this. Yeah. Just some kind of support system for people because it's hard. It's not easy.
It's true.
And it's a beautiful thing that I think that we're doing. It's so inspiring, to be able to think about this and dedicate ourselves to this part, So I think it's important. It's important to nurture yourselves with other people, their knowledge and their happiness and their sadness too, and everything together.
Yeah. Wow, very well said. And look, we're starting to run out of time here. I'm so appreciative of your generosity in coming out here and helping me with this analysis and opening up this whole new window of insight into the health of my ecosystem. It's been fantastic. And for the connections that you've shared, I'm very grateful. And I really look forward to doing more projects like this together, finding more overlap in our work and our networks. Cool. And yeah, thanks for everything.
Thank you so much.
Before we go, how can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about your services?
Yeah, okay. I have a web that I need to be worked on. But anyway, it's called Terra Viva. Terra / guion. I don't know.
Yeah.
Viva, .es. It's a web. I do lab tests, consulting, anything that classes too. Love compost, but anything. So I think either that or my email, which is hola@terraviva.es. But yes, sure. That's the best way to get to me.
Don't worry about it. I'll make sure to add the links to that into your social media so I can find you real easily.
Spanish thing, yeah.
Thanks again so much for coming over. It's great to catch up with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks once again to Isa. As I said at the end there, you can find all the links to follow up with her directly in the show notes for this episode on the website at regenerativeskills.com. Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators, as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.